This week on the Baseline Podcast, Josh and I break down the recap of March Madness. What are our thoughts on the men's and women's tournament this year? Is it really worth watching anymore? And then we move on to baseball, of course, because it is April and baseball is here, and we talk about the Guardians and the Reds. What are they doing well? What could they be doing better? And then we finish up with probably our favorite segment of the year, which is the top 5 greatest sports movies of all time. Who's on our list? Come check it out. All that and so much more coming up on the Baseline Podcast. Hey, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Baseline Podcast. I'm Ben. That's Joshed. Wow. That was weird. That was weird. I messed up your name. No, that is Josh. But happy Easter to all of you out there. This will be coming out, I'm pretty sure, right around that Easter Sunday. So hope you guys have a great time with family. That means there's not a lot of sports going on, Josh. I mean, really, the sport is kind of like a weird, like subtle break right now. And then there's this ramp up at the end of April. So, Josh, how was your week? How's the weather over there in Ohio? Is it crazy cold? Because it's been cold here and it's just been weird. But what's going on over there?
We've been dealing with storms. Temperature-wise, it's been great all week, about 50s, 60s. Yeah. But we're under a tornado little threat there in the middle of the week, but didn't get anything. And today it's sunny and probably about 60 degrees, so can't complain about weather. What about over in Hungary?
Well, it is a nuts time because Hungary is about the same as Ohio, so it just decides to be bipolar about every 4 or 5 days. So it was very warm about a week-ish ago, and then the last few days it's been about 30 degrees Fahrenheit. As we're recording this on Friday, so Good Friday. Tomorrow, which is Saturday, and hopefully it comes out around here, is actually we're playing our first football game, our first regular season game, and I'm not looking forward to coaching it. I don't mind playing in bad weather or like rain or cold, but like when you're coaching and you're just kind of like you stand still, and you're just like, all right, next play, so it's just weird, it's been a weird weather, but hey, you know what? It's fun, right? Sports, weather, it's going to be exciting. We have the Masters going on. There's baseball going on. There's, NBA playoffs are coming around. But we really wanted to start, Josh. We talked about this before the show. We wanted to start briefly to talk about, our thoughts on March Madness, maybe both women's and guys, and then also talk about some transfers that are going on. So, Josh, what did you notice from the I guess maybe both women's and guys March Madness, but specifically, what did you notice in the men's March Madness this year?
First off, everyone, take notice that we are not wearing FAU National Champs T-shirts, unfortunately.
This is true.
I think we both were picking FAU, or not picking, but rooting for FAU to be the winner last week. But UConn was who I picked to win. It got a little close there. I think it got a little close there. About 8 minutes left in the game. San Diego State had cut it down, I think, to like 6 points, maybe something like that. And then UConn just went back to doing what they've been doing, not only that game, but all tournament, and just continue to run away with it. So undefeated outside of the Big East, Ben. 5 titles in 25 years is pretty solid.
Yeah.
So UConn, congrats on a solid season, I guess. The tournament as a whole, I wasn't as excited about or watching as closely as in the past.
I agree.
That might have been, whether that was because of how many low seeds are moving on, or because my Tar Heels weren't in it, so that took away some interest as well. But even like following on the internet, it seems like more people were much more interested in what was going on in the women's tournament, and they got to end their tournament, I guess, on a bang too. It was all the talk of Angel Reese with the ring, the gesture, and all the talk since. But Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, that could be a fun rivalry, not only in college hoops, but continue on in WNBA stuff in the future.
Yeah, I'm going back to before we talk about Angela Reese, because I have a thing about that. But talking about UConn, right? Like, someone said, is UConn, one of the best programs ever? And if you look at national titles, they're in the top what, 4, right? Like there's only like 3
They've
other
won
teams.
5. I think
Yeah.
Carolina has 6 or 7.
Yeah, and then UCLA has
Kansas has
11.
3, I think,
Yep,
right?
UCLA has 11. Yep. UCLA has 11. San Francisco, University of San Francisco has 2, more than Ohio State.
Hmm.
So, just rocking and rolling back then. But no, it's interesting because you look at UConn and you said something very interesting, right? Undefeated outside of the Big East, and that just one shows you how good the Big East was. I mean, just top to bottom, it's a solid league. Um, but really, you looked at the way they dominated every team. Like, look, I picked Iona to upset them, right? And I was proven wrong, right? I was proven wrong. I'll own up to it. I'm
I also did,
sorry.
I think.
Yeah. So I mean, we had these like picks, and then you look at FAU, right? I'll go to FAU. I mean, they were what, seconds away from going to a national title game. I mean, literally, they were
San Diego
seconds
State
away.
won on a buzzer beater. Yep.
Yeah.
It was a fun,
So
fun game to watch. I did watch that one.
I think that was more fun than the UConn.
UConn Miami, I
Yeah,
didn't
it just
really
wasn't.
follow that one
Yeah, it
because
wasn't
I
fun.
had a feeling UConn was just going to run
And
away with it.
and you said something that was interesting, Josh. And you said, maybe that the women's tournament was more exciting, or like more entertaining, or more views. And I think part of that is because of that, of what Caitlin Clark has done, and she's done something that
Yes,
no
she
man or
was
woman
the
has ever
star
done.
player that broke out,
Yeah,
similar to how Steph Curry did with Davidson, or how we've seen some of these other
yeah.
individuals just
Well, I
break
mean,
out
even
during the tournament.
and even the story of LSU's head coach, right? It's the first, I think, women's coach to lead multiple schools to national titles. She won it as a player, as an assistant coach, as a coach, a head coach. So like, to me, right, like that's one story. Then you have the Angela Reese story of her, of doing the whole, you can't see me, and a lot of people are giving her heart for that, and I'm just kind of like, you know what, Caitlin Clark started it a few times, a few games before, I think. And for me, I'm like, I've always been the believer, like, if they started it, right, like you finish it, right. And Angel Reese just said, I'm just gonna just prove a point, right. And again, there's nothing against Caitlin Clark. I think she's going to be phenomenal in the WNBA. I mean, she's going to be very good. Um, but I think the difference between the men's and women's is the fact that big teams in the men's, right, the teams that were supposed to be there sucked, right, and it is not drawing views as LSU, who lost I think 3 games all year. You had Iowa, who ran over the Big Ten pretty
Yeah,
much.
that was a 2 and a 3 seed, I think. South Carolina was in the Final Four, and I believe
Yeah,
they were a 1 seed. UConn was a high seed, I think, in the women's side as well, right? And
but
made
the
it
Ohio
a
State beat
decent
them
run.
though. Ohio State beat them
That's right. Yeah.
to go to the Elite Eight. But you think about UConn, I want to say something about UConn. I read it. I think I shared it on our story that it was like, I think they've had 16 national titles since 1999 between the men's and women's program, which is just mind boggling. The
Yeah.
fact that they've just owned basketball for the last, 20 some years. So, yeah, I think it's very interesting. It was a great tournament, but I agree with you. Like, I didn't really watch this tournament. Like, even over here, even the time difference, didn't really watch it because I just didn't see the importance. Not to say it wasn't important, but it was just like, there's nothing grabbing me this year. Every year, there's always been a storyline. There was no
Hmm.
real storyline this year.
The
There
real
wasn't.
storyline was
Yeah,
just, I guess, the low seeds being there,
yeah, and
right?
that was
Like,
it.
there wasn't necessarily a player or anything like that, or like team, I guess, that was like ultra losing record or big time losing record the year
Yeah,
before and comes back. Like, I don't know. But it's over now, and I guess that's that, right?
yeah. Do you think? But do you think that? Do you think March Madness is getting to the point where it's going to be less viewed just as the years go on? Like, do you think we're getting to that point where it's like people? I don't know. Like, I've the last few years, I've just started hearing more and more people like, I'm not watching March Madness this year. I might keep track of it, but I'm not really going to be paying attention. Do you think we're getting to the point where people are only going to pay attention to the Final Four, to the championship game, like it's never been before?
I don't know. Yeah. And I can't really think of anything that's drastically changed
Yeah,
in the tournament since like when we were younger, and we were much more, I guess, focused on it.
yeah,
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's one of the best things in college sports though,
for
like still
sure. Yeah,
overall. I don't think that you can make it any better by, I know some people were advocating for less teams in the future. I definitely don't think you need to add any more.
No,
Like
that's
it
for sure. Yeah, yeah.
used to be 64. I honestly don't really care about the playing games all that much. I'd rather just
Same.
keep it an even 64. But yeah, I don't know what they could do to make it better. I don't think you add or remove any teams. I guess just in the future, the bigger teams should step up a little bit more and show up, right?
Yeah, I
If
agree.
if
Yeah.
if that's what we think the reason is that it wasn't as good, most people weren't as interested in watching, a team like San Diego State or FAU.
Yeah.
It's up to teams like I guess Kansas, UCLA, your Gonzagas, your Kentuckys, your Dukes, your North Carolinas to step up and I guess be the programs that people expect you to be.
Yeah. Agree 100%. Again, it's fun for these small schools, but these big schools, man, that's a lot of money they're losing. I mean, there's a lot
Yeah.
of boosters that aren't going to be given, that's very possible, right? So, very interesting. But that wasn't the end of college basketball, Josh. I know you wanted to talk about some transfers that went on over here in college basketball. And specifically, there was one from your good old Tar
Did
Heels that
I or did you
transferred.
want to talk about this?
I mean, we both kind of did. We're going to say both. Okay, it sounds natural. No. So what do you first off? What do you want to? What do you think about the transfers from North Carolina? Now I know that I think was there two that transferred out of North Carolina. Was there two?
Uh, Caleb Love's the only big one I know. If
Yeah,
anyone else transferred out, they weren't playing a ton.
yeah. So what do you think about Caleb Love leaving? Like as a North Carolina fan, like do you think this hurt the program, or is this more of like he was kind of going his separate ways anyways, or I don't know, like what your thoughts are on that?
I think it like obviously he was a part of that team that made the run in the tournament a couple years ago, and he was a big part of that. But even what following North Carolina for most of the season, you kind of lived and died by Caleb Love, and he heated
Yeah,
up in the tournament, so they're winning a lot of games. So just like he can be the reason for a lot of big wins, he can be the reason for a lot of questionable losses too at that point guard spot. I know I think it's Michigan that he's going to, and
yeah,
for
just
their
announced.
program at least, who's losing Hunter Dickinson, who's
Yeah,
I think number one player in the portal right now. I think
yeah,
that's for Michigan at least. It's a nice get. For North Carolina, like I said, it's kind of like you live and die by Caleb Love, and
yeah,
at least this past season it didn't work out so much. So maybe it is time for both of them to move on. And I know the Tar Heels got I think Baycott and RJ Davis back next year, so two solid veteran presences there for next season. Hopefully they can maybe go out and get someone else in the portal, kind of like how they did with Brady Manick a couple
yeah.
years ago as well, and maybe make another run to uh, back to postseason play next year since this season was such the disappointment was.
Yeah, man, and I know how you feel, right? Like I think every team hates losing those kind of guys. I think about it in the uh, you know, in Ohio State's case, right? I wanted to talk briefly about Jamison Battle. I don't know if you know Jamison Battle. Do you know? I don't know if you know much about him.
I don't.
So he played at Minnesota. He averaged, I believe, like 15 a game this year. Had like 6 rebounds, averaged 6 rebounds. He's 6'7", small forward, big wing. People don't realize Ohio State is losing Justice Suing, likely they're losing McNeil, and they just had another guy transfer
And
out.
Sensabaugh declared, right?
Yeah, and Sensible declared. So they're losing 5 wings, and I think they have one left, right? So he's 6'7". He's a pretty good defender, can stretch the ball, can shoot the three. And as you saw, and as I've told you many times, Ohio State looked like the worst Ohio State team we've seen in a very long time. Probably.
After starting off the first half
Yeah,
looking like one of the best.
exactly. So getting some veteran leadership, he'll have 1 year left. Veteran leadership. With this freshman class coming in, which by the way is one of the best freshman class in the country coming in. Maybe Ohio State can do something. I don't know, right? Like we don't know, and a lot of these different transfers, right? Like Hunter Dickinson, like where do you think like do you think he goes to a bigger school? Like does he go to Kentucky? Does he go to a Kansas, or does he go somewhere else? But I don't know. But it's interesting with that one.
Yeah, I would think a guy like Dickinson, he sees the future at Michigan and that they're not going to win any titles. So I think
Yeah,
since he hasn't gone to the NBA and he's staying at school, I think he's going to go to a spot where you can maybe make a run for a title, whether that be like you mentioned Kansas. I could see it maybe even being a place like UCLA. Maybe
North
he goes to
Carolina.
Texas. North Carolina would be nice. We'd take him over there for sure. But yeah, I think he's going to go to a team that is definitely going to be in title contention next year. It's not going to be any kind of lateral move or like like he doesn't need to go to a smaller school to get more playing time because he's already one of the best in the country playing at Michigan. So he's going to go somewhere I think where he can win.
It is funny though that like he must have not got a good grade, by scouts if he didn't declare, right? Because he's
That's
good
how
at
I
that
thought about
position.
Baycott too at North Carolina after the title run. It's like you're telling me he's only graded late second round. Like I would have thought being like ACC player of the year, a walking double double, that he would have been like a surefire
Yeah,
first rounder, but not the case.
yeah. It is fascinating, and I always wonder like, and it's kind of funny to watch like these transfers, and I mean, man, every time I watch the transfer portal, man, no matter if it's football or basketball, man, it's like free agency, man. It is just like it is fascinating. Like I'm going on a visit to North Carolina this weekend. I'm going to go next weekend to Clemson. I'm going to see what they can give me, and it's mind boggling to me, like what basketball and football have come to because of the transfer portal.
That's the era, yeah. It's going to be interesting too. I think once we get rid of all these players with the extra COVID years too,
Oh my
like
gosh,
that, you
that
got
drives me
all the
nuts,
extra
man.
like fifth year guys too that you wouldn't have had otherwise. So
But
that's
what
also made things more interesting.
But what do you think about like what do you think about the guy? I forget his name. I think he was from Illinois, Chicago or something that like he was 3 points off of the record for most points in a career. Um and he was complaining that, their team was under 500 and they didn't get an invite to any of the postseason tournaments. So I'm like, first off, you're under 500. You don't deserve to go. And
Hmm.
second off, and I was like, it's frustrating because you
He
you
played
have
what, 5 years? He had a three
no,
point
I
line.
think he almost played 6 years. I think it was it 6 years or five. I cannot
I
remember.
don't know about him, but like Pete Maravich has the
Yeah,
record
3 years.
with
He played
three
3 years.
seasons because when he was in school, freshmen weren't allowed to play,
Yeah.
and he didn't have a 3 point line either.
Yes. And I just think, and Maravich was a freak. But this guy only, give credit. He averaged 20 points a season for 5 seasons.
Hmm.
And he still came up 3 points short. Let's just put that in perspective of how
Yeah.
good Pete Maravich was. The fact that he did it
Yep.
in 3 seasons with a ton of less games, right? Like they didn't play it that many games those years.
Yeah.
And imagine what Pete Maravich would have done with a 3 point line. Just
Yeah.
imagine what that man would
Or
have
if he
done.
could have played as a freshman, he was probably good enough.
Yeah. And so this guy like went and complained throughout the NCAA tournament. I was like, dude, like just have the fact that you're second overall to Pete Maravich, like you should already be just okay with that. But he also played for his dad, so kind of
Mm.
could see that coming. But yeah, so that is basketball talk again. I should say college basketball talk. Briefly, Josh, before we move on from the old hardwood, I guess is what we call it, the hardwood. What do you think about these NBA playoffs and some of these things going on? We have, obviously Kyrie Irving going to Dallas, and Dallas is basically just tanked and have just fell off the map. And some would say they've flattened out. Get it? The flat Earth theory. Kyrie
I got it.
got it. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Um, what do you think about that? And obviously in the East, pretty much in the East, we've got it settled. I think there's a few
We know all
spots. I
10
mean,
teams in the
yeah,
East. Yeah. There's a couple seeds that still need
yeah,
decided, but at least out in the West,
it's just
seeds
chaos.
5 through 11 are all separated by about 3 or 4 games, it looks like.
Yeah,
And
which is interesting.
the Clippers currently have the 5 seed. They aren't even a lock like
I
for
know
the
that's
playoffs.
nuts.
So yeah, be on the lookout for that.
So
Uh,
what do you think about like I want to put in perspective. What do you think about the Cavs, right? The Cavs getting the 4 seed, locking up that home court advantage, which by the way, if you didn't know, the Cavs cannot win on the road. If you look at their road record, it's absolutely atrocious, but they can win at home. And
31
then
and 9 at home.
yes, they're unreal at home. Um, you saw what Donovan Mitchell has done this year. He has the most 40-point games in a season for a Cavalier. He has the second most 40-point games ever as a Cavalier in one season. Is this the shift where we start seeing Cleveland become its own basketball team without really having to ever mention LeBron? Like, do you feel like we're getting to this point where we're like, this is a new era that we don't really have to talk about LeBron anymore? Because I think even last year we talked about, well, what if LeBron was on this team? Well, let's bring
Yeah.
LeBron back. Do you think we're at that
Oh,
point?
I feel like even last year getting in the play in, like that's already farther than what people thought they could get.
Yeah.
without LeBron. And now that you can actually be in the playoff with a home court series, I guess, with like you mentioned, Donovan and Jarrett Allen and Darius Garland, and you got Isaac Okoro on this team. They definitely got their own, I guess, team, their own era.
Yeah.
Like I don't think there's now that Kevin Love's gone, I don't think there's anybody left from those finals teams
Osman,
runs.
I think Osman might be the only one. I think Chetty might be the only one I think that's
Oh,
left.
maybe yeah. Yeah, this is definitely a Cleveland's own team. 51-30 right now. We'll see what I guess the final game puts them at. But 4 seed probably playing the Knicks in the
Yep.
first series. I think this is a great stepping stone into I guess future winning seasons for the team. Like definitely past the LeBron era though. Like nobody's looking back. It's like all now and
Yeah.
forward from here.
And also I want to see Stephen A just really ticked off. Just that the fact that they lost the Cavaliers. I would love to see the Knicks just lose the Cavs. It would just be amazing.
Oh yeah.
But also I think with the Cavs too, I think you have so many young guys, right? Evan Mobley, Isaiah Mobley, you have, Jarrett Allen, Garland, Mitchell. I mean, even Mitchell's young. He's only like 26. So it's like, and the thing is Kevin Love left the Cavs and he's done nothing in Miami. So he was like kind of forced his way out. He kind of said, I don't want to, I don't want to be a bench guy. And I'm like, dude, you're doing nothing in Miami. So it's very fascinating to me what's going on with Cleveland. And in the West, we look at LeBron. Josh, do you think that this is the end? Are we seeing the beginning of the end? I know LeBron's numbers are really good still, but this doesn't seem like a LeBron team, even though they're winning lately and they've been having some good streaks here. Is this the end of LeBron as we know it? And will he make it to see Bronny in the NBA?
Of course, someone's gonna sign him, whether it's the Lakers or whichever is the team that drafts Bronny is definitely gonna add him on. It's gonna be like a package deal, and I'm
Yeah,
pretty sure LeBron would even be willing to take a pay cut to make that happen if money was
yeah,
uh the issue. But the team that's gonna be drafting Bronny is probably gonna be a lottery team that's not making the playoffs too. So if you
yeah.
can't draw fans in by winning, you might as well draw attention from fans and the media for other reasons. And having both LeBrons in the league would definitely do that. But right now they're looking at if the season were to end today, the 7th seed.
Playing
Um,
game again.
yeah, they'll be in the play-in, and if they're lucky to get out, they'll be playing either Denver or Memphis, and that's no easy series either.
No.
So I would, if I was a betting man, I'd say yeah, this is Lakers is definitely getting eliminated round one. I don't think playing any of those teams are gonna bow down or like choke that bad.
Speaking of LeBron, being a former MVP, and speaking of the Denver Nuggets, Josh, who do you think should be the MVP this year? We get a lot of debate right now from good old Kendrick Perkins, who we know is just solid with every advice that he gives. He's saying Joel Embiid, who's been racking up points, but then people are saying Nikola Jokic, which by the way, Jokic played in the game that was supposed to be versus Embiid, and Embiid missed it. So that's kind of some funny things. But who do you think right now, if the NBA and if the season ended today, would be your MVP overall?
I don't know. I haven't followed it enough. I can tell you that they're both like top 10 in points
Yep.
and rebounds, I think.
Yep.
Jokic is like a walking triple double.
Yep.
Embiid's the NBA's leading scorer right now at 33 a game. It could honestly go either way. I might lean Jokic, but
I
I
mean,
wouldn't
like
be
you
mad
think
either
about
way.
it. If Jokic wins it, that'd be three in a row. Like, when was the last time we saw a three-peat in the MVP? Like, I
I don't
don't know
even
when.
I
I
don't even
don't
think
know if
MJ
it
did
was.
that. I think
Yeah,
like usually after two they get tired of it
but I
and give
think
it to
there's
somebody new.
there's been no one this year outside of maybe Embiid that have just been impressive. Like, really, there hasn't been anybody that's been like jaw dropping. I mean, I think Mitchell deserves some votes of what he's doing in Cleveland.
I'd
I
say
mean,
Luca too, averaging 32, 8,
yeah,
and 8.
yeah,
That's
Luca.
someone
But
that you got
and
to
what do you
consider.
think? Speaking of, I spoke about Kyrie at the beginning. Like, what happens to Dallas here, right? If they don't make the playoffs, which they're right now looking like they're not going to make it, like what? Like, you gave up so much for this whole thing. You thought it was going to work. Like, does this prove that Kyrie really is like a cancer in the locker room, or is this he's just
I don't know.
I'm just interested to see.
Stylistically, I don't know why they thought it would work, and Kyrie wasn't going to fit into an offense like this in a backcourt with
And
a
you
guy
said
like
this, by the
Luka.
way. You
Yeah,
said this. You said this as soon as the trade happened. I remember you said this on our next episode. You said you didn't think it was going to work.
didn't think it would. I don't think for the same reasons that LeBron and Westbrook didn't work out with the Lakers is you can't have, and I guess Kyrie and James Harden in Brooklyn, you can't have two ball dominant guards in
Yeah,
your backcourt
it's
like
true.
that. Like somehow Russell Westbrook and James Harden worked out in Houston. They
I don't
didn't
know
win a
how that
ring, but
happened.
they
Yeah.
weren't a epic failure though out there either. But that's the only time I've seen that work.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, I
You
don't
got to have
think,
guys that can play off the ball and
yeah,
distribute.
I don't think Kyrie stays. I think he walks after this year and goes somewhere. I don't know where. Please not back to Cleveland. Um,
Maybe he
but,
retires. He's
I
talked
don't
about
know. Yeah,
retiring
no.
young.
He might walk off, well, he doesn't walk off the earth because remember it's just a straight line. But uh that is our NBA talk because there's not crazy amount going on. But I know Josh, we had talked about a couple other news stories that are happening. First off, let's just briefly talk about your Indians. Sorry, Guardians. I want to be politically correct on the show. Um, Guardians and my Reds. So how are your Guardians doing? And I'll briefly talk about how my Reds are doing as we give an update. Obviously, they're playing games as these are being recorded, so we won't talk about those specifically. But how do you feel your Guardians are doing early on here?
Can't really complain. Right now they're 5-2,
That's
winning
not
the
bad.
AL Central. Yeah. Miles Straw's leading the team in batting average after barely hitting 200 last year. So that's I don't know how sustainable that's going to be. Stephen Kwan is
Just
leading
lighten it
in
up, man.
RBIs right now. So
Lighten
a
it
lot
up.
of interesting things. Hunter Gaddis has been a nice addition to the pitching staff as well. I think he is two starts in. Okay, he's got one win here, but can't really complain about anything. I think the only thing I'd say that's looking kind of iffy right now is James Karinchak handling the, I guess, switch to the pitch clock just with his rotation. It doesn't look like he's super comfortable there yet. And then I'd say Josh Bell, too, is batting .091 in that cleanup spot. Not good, but those are the only things that I guess I'm noticing this early on. And it's early. Like they've only
Yeah.
gotten two series in. They're starting their, I think, third series this weekend with Seattle again. So that's a little summary of Cleveland. So far, so good.
Yeah, the Reds, man. Where do I start? They still suck because until they prove me otherwise, they're going to suck. No, the Reds are interesting right now. As we're recording this on Friday, they're playing a double header, which I think every team's playing a double header today because all the games that got canceled in the East. But so the Reds have had already two games canceled. They're making up one today, another one later, but they're 3-2. I've been very disappointed with Hunter Green. Today, as we're recording this against the Phillies, he went 4 2/3. I think he only went 4 innings last start, gave up a bunch of runs last start, and it's just disappointing because this just seems like a common theme with him is that he'll go 4 or 5 innings. He'll throw 100 pitches and walk five, strike out six, or whatever, and it's kind of frustrating. You would hope there's more development there. But other than that, like I've been really happy to see Stevenson bounce back from injury and he's tearing the cover off the ball. It's interesting though with Stevenson. I don't know if you know this, Josh, but he's not going to be playing catcher full time this year. So he's going to be going to first base a lot, and then Votto will be DHing. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that dynamic, works out. That's why they're carrying three catchers on the roster, which the only team that does that. Um, so that's fascinating. Also, Jonathan India tearing the cover off the ball in spring training, carried that over to the regular season so far. And then we have this guy. By the way, I got to look up his name. Got to say it correctly. They got him as he was like a non-invitee, I guess, to training camp. His name is I got to read it here. Jason Vosler. In already, and this is today, including today, in 5 games, he has 3 home runs and 7 RBIs. His career high is 4 home runs in a season in the MLB. And so he's a 29-year-old, like young, not really a young guy anymore, but he's just been tearing the cover out the ball. And so it's cool to see those stories. Obviously, we love seeing those stories. But right now, it looks like they're losing to the Phillies, who are 1-5 as we're recording this. So of course, because the Reds can't beat the teams that they should be beating. So um, But yeah, man, it's interesting. And again, I'm interested to see the Cincinnati Cleveland series. I think it's coming up here probably soon. So I'm interested to see how that goes. But yeah, man, it's exciting. Baseball is back. But Josh, we have only a few things left. One thing I will say before we get into our fun topic for today, which I think Josh is probably, I don't know how excited he is about it. But we want to talk about Tyreek Hill real quickly. Josh, what do you have to say about Tyreek Hill? And what is the news that maybe some people didn't realize came out this week?
Yeah, I guess he says he's retiring after 2025 when his deal with the Dolphins is done. I think he'll be 31 at that time.
31. Yeah.
He could probably get another decent contract after that, but I mean, NFL not for long. We don't know what his numbers could be looking
Yeah.
like. He'll be slowing down. I know that's a big part of his game too. So I think he wants to get into like more social media stuff and the gaming esports scene. So I mean,
Oh, Tyreek.
if you can get into the league, make a decent amount of money,
Dude,
he
yeah.
has a ring, and then get out like while still fully healthy
Why
on your own
not?
terms, I say good for him. But
Yeah.
also being 31, Miami seems to be building something here. If they're
I
still
know.
like contending year by year, that also depends on Tua's
Yeah.
health too. But
And
it's gonna be interesting. I don't know if I believe him,
okay, I
but
was about to say that. I was like, do you believe him? Because I don't believe him. I don't
yeah,
believe
I
him for
don't
one
know.
bit.
I think
One
in
bit.
theory it sounds like good for him.
Publicity.
We've seen guys like retire on their own terms, young, like Luke
Andrew Luck.
Kuechly and Andrew Luck and Patrick Willis, and the list goes on. So maybe not as shocking. I guess it's just a white him Megatron too, Calvin Johnson. I was just trying to think of like some more skill position guys. Like it's been like the guys are getting hit a lot and taking a lot of contact, and he hasn't taken
Yeah.
a ton, but if you can get out on your own terms, make some money and get a ring, I say good for him. Whether
Yeah,
or not he follows through with it, I don't know, but in
yeah.
theory, it sounds like a good plan.
I don't believe him. I probably won't believe him until I see it happen because these kind of guys just want publicity and they want to have like this story behind them and then, throw a big old curveball in there and switch it all up on people at one point. But yeah, man, it's NFL is interesting, man. Like one day a guy can be a star and then 2 years later he's done. Right. And so I get it too, like from a business aspect, like, hey, I want to be healthy. I want to be able to do things I want on my time span. Right. So again, I look at the Cleveland Browns. There's talk that Cam Newton might want to come to Cleveland, and I'm like, nah. We'll just we already got one guy that's struggling, with staying on the field. I don't need. Oh, we don't need another distraction.
I'd take Cam
Um,
Newton as a backup quarterback.
I wouldn't, but that's a topic for another day. But Josh, it's been a crazy year of sports for us. Obviously, we've been doing this for over a year now. We've had a lot of interviews, had a lot of crazy, conversations with people. Again, make sure you drop those below of who you would like to see in the future this summer. But Josh, I have a crazy talk for you, and we're going to debate this here and now. Josh, what is your top 5 greatest sports movies of all time? And this will be so hot in the hot debate in the comments because I've done this before with my brother on another podcast, and yeah, it doesn't always end well. There's a lot of debating, especially when it comes to, at least we're not doing Disney. Disney's a whole nother world. But Josh, here we go. Maybe we can go 5 and 5 and we'll go down. So you start at your fifth one and we'll go down. So your fifth best sports movie of all time.
Yeah, so this was a tough one. I just started off naming about every single sports movie I've watched, and then a few of them to me like definitely stood out as locks, and then a couple of them I was leaning more towards my opinion. I tried to keep this like objective for the most part with
Mm-hmm.
the ones that I think are the best, maybe not necessarily my favorite. And
Yeah.
then for anything that I thought was close, I just went with the one that I like better. So
Yeah.
starting off at number 5, I've got Happy Gilmore, Adam
Ooh,
Sandler. It's one that probably people don't really think of when they
that's
think of sports
true.
movies,
I didn't
but
think
it's
of that.
hockey and golf together. I
That
think
is
it's just because
true.
it's a comedy and not based on a true story, people might overlook it. But as I was thinking through things, it's like, man, movies like this isn't in my list, but stuff like Talladega Nights, NASCAR,
That's also true.
sports movie.
Sports.
It's kind of like you get into that discussion of is Die Hard a Christmas movie? You know what I mean? Like it's taking place on Christmas, but it's not necessarily about Christmas.
That
So
is true.
I think Happy Gilmore is definitely a sports movie. It's number 5 for me. What about you?
So I have an honorable mention I want to mention because I was on the same the same wavelength as you because I had Chariots of Fire as an honorable mention for me. It's a classic historical fiction movie, sports drama, all mixed in there. One of my favorite movies. I remember watching it a few times. I think growing up. But again, if you don't know it, it's I'll kind of read you the description. I wrote it down. So basically, it's about a running. Basically, it's like running during I think World War
Yeah.
II, and it's a British guy, and it's such a fascinating movie. I really recommend it. It's powerful. The story's powerful, and obviously, it's based off a true story. But then number five for me, I'm kind of went on the comedy route too. Is Caddyshack. Caddyshack
Okay.
for me is number five, and I feel you can't have a top five without Caddyshack in it. But it's not like one of the best movies, obviously, ever sports movies. And again, people are going to give us a gripe here because both of us picked a comedy movie in our top five. But let's be honest, what makes a good sports movie? Really funny jokes in the middle of it, and just great humor of like stories and everything like that. And I think Caddyshack is one of the best movies, especially when it comes to sports and mixing that
Hmm.
comedy. So that's number five for me. What do you got for number four?
Number four, this is a childhood favorite,
Oh boy,
super quotable, has some of the most legendary fictional characters in it. That's The Sandlot.
dude,
The
dude.
Sandlot,
Oh,
man.
such a good movie.
Benny the Jet Rodriguez, Hamilton the Babe Porter, Scotty Smalls,
Scotty
Hercules, the
Smalls.
dog. Like, there's just so many lines
And I
and
think it's
moments.
relatable.
And
It's relatable. Like you grew
yeah,
up that like you everyone grows up playing baseball in America, really. Like
growing up
we
with the
all grew up
neighborhood
around it.
kids playing, wiffle ball out in the
Dude,
yard or
100%.
whatever. Yeah. So
So that's number four.
Sandlot's one that I still watch it probably like once a year.
Ooh, see, I will say that it's in my top five, but it's not yet.
Okay.
Number four for me, and I gotta find my list here again. So number four for me is Rudy. Rudy is number four for me. If you guys don't know the movie Rudy, then I'm sorry.
Cliche.
You have not been watching this ever because it's so if you don't know the main actor in it is the one that plays
Sean Austin,
yeah, he plays in Harry Potter, not Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings,
Lord of the
right?
Rings.
Lord of the Rings. It's basically a story about like a lifelong dream of a guy who's a walk on. I think he's a walk on, right? Yeah, he's a walk on at Notre
He had to
Dame.
walk on. He was only scout
Yeah,
team for the
yeah.
longest
He was
time
scout
too.
team. Back then they did a lot of scout team where people came and was the scout team and everything. And it's great. There's a lot of comedy, not really comedy, I guess. It's just like funny things that happen, but the story is
How he got
awesome.
in, like he just was like a weirdo with this
Yeah, he
dream
was
that
weird.
was
Yeah, yeah.
unattainable, and people were like, "Dude, you can't do it." Like he not only was not athletically gifted, but he also was not academically gifted, and he
Yes.
had the path that he
The
had to
fact that he
take
was
to
in Notre Dame
just
is
just get
weird.
into Notre Dame. Like forget about playing college football. Like how did he even get into Notre Dame?
That's
Like
yeah, that's true.
academics, yeah.
But the
Like
best part is obviously you hear this Rudy, Rudy, Rudy. So, I mean, that's just the most classic like chant of any movie, at least in my head that I hear of chant. That's what's one thing that goes with me. But Rudy, yeah, Rudy's number four for me. It's a classic. I've watched it so many times growing up, and you can't go wrong with a good Rudy. Good Rudy walk through or watch through, I guess. What do you got for number three there, Josh? Your top three, man. We're hitting your top three, these top ones here.
number three, we have yet to hit on one based on a true story yet, but this is one of the most legendary fictional figures of all time, I feel like. So much so that there's a statue in the city this movie is based off
I
of,
knew this was
and
coming.
that's Rocky.
Which
The
Rocky
come
though?
up from being a bum in the streets to fighting one of the greatest fighters at the time, and going the distance when nobody thought he'd even last a round. And then, there's a whole series of comeback stories with that, but the first Rocky, like
Of
you can
course, yeah,
say what
yeah.
you want about it being repetitive, about there being too
Who
much, but
cares?
that first movie, I think that's like one of those movies that just
Da,
has to be a surefire lock.
da, da, da,
Yep, the
da, da,
music.
da, da. Anyways, number three for me is well, this is tough because these next three, right? We already know that one of mine's Sandlot, but the other two, obviously, I had to leave one off. And the thing is, I left Rocky off, Josh, and part of me is because I kind of
Mm.
forgot that Rocky, like
Is it
I
a
knew,
sports movie?
like I knew it was a sports movie, but like I didn't think of it as like when I was going through my list, right? So it's in my top 10, right? I just didn't put it in my list. So I'm sorry, everyone. You can all shoot me later. No, number three for me is Hoosiers. I mean, it's you've lived in Indiana, Josh. You know how
Hmm.
big basketball is there. And Hoosiers, if you've ever been in the gym, I've never gotten the chance to walk in the gym where it was
I
filmed.
never made the trip down to the gym either when I lived over there.
Yeah. But it
It was a
is,
few hours away, but still
yeah, and
never got around to it.
it is such an iconic movie. Now, a lot of these new age kids, these kids are, 12, 13, they watch the movie like, oh, it's so like old school. But like, dude, when you're growing up and you're playing basketball like I did, I've watched that movie so many times. Like it is just a classic, like build it kind of like that build up kind of story where it's a team that has to defy the odds, right? They would say. Um it just it's such a classic movie. Like if you don't have it in your top, at least top 10, you're just nuts. I'm sorry. But Hoosiers for me is at number three. Josh, I hope you have Hoosiers at least in your top 10. I don't know if it's going to be in your top five, but I hope it's in your top 10 at least.
Yeah, I don't know. I have a lot of honorable mentions I could have thrown out that I considered, but it might be just on the outside looking in, just
Oh,
because there's other basketball movies like Coach Carter and
yeah,
Glory
that's a good
Road
one.
that
Yeah,
I
that's a
do
good one.
like a
Yeah.
little better. Number two for me, though, we get into one based on a true story finally. This one is one that took place, I believe, in the 80s in the Winter Olympics with
Yep.
the Cold War going on
Yep.
and all the odds stacked
I know where
against
you're
the
going
United
here.
States.
Yeah.
We got the miracle on ice.
Oh, it's such a
Such a
good
good one,
story too.
dude.
Such a great
Yeah,
story.
the coach that got hired on that was crazy enough to plan on winning the thing instead of just coaching to have a good team and be like happy with like I don't know what the heck their
And
expectations
people
were, but
don't
he
realize that the Soviet Union was super good at hockey. Like they were
they
like
were, and they were
the
playing
king.
pros. Like the
Yeah.
United States was still going amateurs at the time, and everyone was questioning why he was coaching the way he was. And he's like, "We've coached this same way for so long, and it's not gotten us anywhere. So if you want to
Yeah.
beat, this incredible team, you got to do something different." And they're like, "You think you can beat them?" And then they did, and
Yeah.
it really happened. It's not just a fun, feel good movie story. It's something that was based on one of the craziest moments in sports, one of the biggest upsets.
Yeah, it's a great story, and unfortunately, it's an honorable mention for me. I'm sorry, Josh. Just it did
Man,
not
I
quite
felt
make
like
my
that
top
was like
five.
a lock for a
No,
top five too.
there's one that might shock you. My top one might shock you, but number two for me is Sandlot. Now, I agree
All
with
right, I
you.
was gonna say that's kind of wild if you had it as
Yeah,
number one.
when you were talking through all the characters, my mind went back to like when I was playing with my cousins, wiffle ball, or my friends playing wiffle ball, and you had a nickname for everyone on the team, right? You always put your best player at a certain place, and you always pointed to the sky, right? Like Ken Griffey or Ichiro, right? And to me, Sandlot, yeah, it's a comedy, right? Like it's not based on a true story like some of these other movies are that we've both mentioned, but it's just the comedy mixed with like memories that you can relate to and just the fun times. Man, I love Sandlot, and the fact that they've recreated it like in commercials or in YouTube videos is just funny, right? It's tremendously just a great movie. It's one of the top comedy movies like that I've ever watched, but it's also a good sports movie as well. So that's number two for me. And Josh, what is your number one greatest sports movie of all time? You said in your head, this is what I think of when I think of the greatest sports movie. What is it? And will you shock us all, or is this just going to be a very common
I
one?
feel like this is going to be a popular pick, and I hope we actually agree on it. But I got Remember the Titans.
Yes. I was
Yes.
so happy. I was worried that we were going to go complete opposite on this, but
What a great story.
such a good
Also,
movie.
kind of during the civil rights movement,
Yep.
when Denzel Washington's character tells Coach Boone tells them all or takes him to that gravesite,
Dude,
I
that was
think
the
during the
coolest
the
scenes of
Civil
all time.
War. and talks about how even 100 years later they're all still fighting that same fight when the two schools
Oh, dude, gives me chills,
merged, the white
man.
school and the black school. Yeah, but
Gives me
he gets them
chills.
to not only get along as friends and teammates, but then they end up making the deep run into the playoffs. And like the Sandlot too, there's so many memorable
So many
characters
comedy
like the
moments.
Rev and Petey and
Sunshine.
Sunshine. Yeah, so
Sunshine.
yeah, like what a heck of a movie. Like
And
not
then
even
the
just as a sports movie, but I think you got to rank that like top 5 or top 10 in all-time movies.
or even like just like, the Yo Mama jokes, like that scene. Like, I mean, it's like just like these random scenes in the middle of like a very passionate, like really hardcore movie, right? Like you watch this movie and you're like, man, like this is real. And this was real back then.
How hard would
Obviously,
it have been too for the old coach Yost, who it was his
exactly.
team, and then they took it away from him after he was already successful in winning, and
Yeah.
I mean, you
Well,
eventually find out later that they did it on purpose, that they could make Coach Boone look bad and fire him and stuff like that,
yeah.
and it ended up backfiring on them.
Yeah.
And then they
Well,
ended up like getting along too. So
yeah, and then if you actually know the story, obviously the star linebacker, right? He ends up getting hit by a car. Oh, sorry, spoiler alert. Should have said that earlier. Gets hit by a
the
car.
movie was made in 2001. If
Yeah,
you haven't seen it by now, it's not a
shame
spoiler
on you.
alert. It's been over
Um,
20 years. What have you been doing?
and I mean, even that car wreck, right? Like the emotion that goes into all these scenes. Darius, right? It's Darius, right? The black guy's Darius, right? I think that's his name.
Julius.
Julius, sorry, Julius. Julius goes and hugs, obviously, Berkshire's mom, right? You see that scene where he's coming over for dinner, right? And that, like, people don't realize how powerful that moment is, because back then that was not something that happened, and you didn't do that, and that was the where the country was. And I think Denzel Washington does like a phenomenal job in this movie. Like this was his, like, to me, was one of his best roles. The power, the message behind it. And again, if you do not have Remember the Titans in your top 10, you're crazy. And if you don't have it in your top 5, there's something wrong with you. Because this movie, it has a story, it has feelings mixed with it. It has a characters that are alive and going. To be honest, one of my favorite characters is Rev. Like just in general, he's just one of my favorite characters in that movie. Sunshine, of course, because just have to watch it to understand why Sunshine is such a great character. But yeah, those are our top 5 greatest movies. Hopefully, I'll put a post together and we'll post it so you guys can just destroy us in the comments. Josh, are you
Mine won't be
surprised?
destroyed.
Oh, are you saying mine is, Josh? Do you disagree with my list?
I'm just saying, I don't think there's many arguments you can make against mine. I think it's a solid top 5.
Solid top 5. Maybe busting with
I
the
think you went more of like the classic traditional route.
yes, I did. I did went more. I went more like I know what I like, and I know what is good in my brain.
Honestly, the only one that I'm surprised that you threw in there, like knowing you, was Caddyshack. I thought that was a little more out there for you,
It
but
it, it is, but I also love comedy. So for
mhm.
me, like it just has always been good. Like I guess for me, Miracle, it's a great movie. I just think for me, it's not like, I guess I'm not really into hockey, so I think that also affects it, because I think it depends on what sports you're into and how it
Mhm.
affects your viewpoint. Um, Coach Carter was a honorable mention for me because that's just a great movie. In general, really, Samuel L. Jackson is just on point in
Yeah.
that movie.
Like
Um,
other ones that I was considering were like I said, Glory Road and Coach Carter, so I could get like a basketball win, but just didn't make the cut. Field of Dreams was another one that I
Field of
considered,
Dreams, another good one.
and for like childhood nostalgia to Mighty Ducks, I thought about
Well,
for a
even
little bit too.
Moneyball's up there too. I mean,
Moneyball, I
that's a solid
like.
one.
I think that I'm in the
You have to be
minority in
a
that,
you have to be a
but
nerd though. Like we have to be,
yeah,
like me and
like
you
I
are
feel like
nerds.
that's a baseball fans movie. Yeah,
Yes. um there's the what's the Browns movie? The Draft Day, or is it
Draft
Draft?
Day.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Draft
and then
Day.
Cleveland Indians with Major League was
Yeah.
one that I like, being a Cleveland fan, but
Yeah, not everyone likes it.
I don't know where that one falls in the rankings.
That's true. But that is what we have for you this week. Nothing crazy, right, Josh? There was nothing crazy this week. We just went simple
Nothing
and
crazy
fun.
like current events wise that either are going to be wrapped up before this podcast ends is going to be the Masters and
Well, technically it'll be the last round of the Masters. which we neither of us really know a lot
I
about. Like
don't know
we don't
enough, but I hope
golf.
someone from the Live Tour wins so that we can heat up the Live and PGA rivalry, dude.
Well,
Like
right now,
the game of golf itself needs this.
well, I know that, but I mean, this is the thing. The top three guys right now, I think two of them are, as we're recording this, are live guys. So there's a
Yeah.
good chance. So, and the third guy is an amateur. So, we're just gonna have fun with it. But whatever
Yeah, like
happens, it will be a blast. I will
get
say
golf hijacked from the PGA. That'd be
this is true.
wild.
This is true. We will be obviously continuing our draft coverage as the draft is drawing
Yeah,
really
we might
near.
put up one more mock
Yes.
3.0 before the draft. I think that would
Yes.
either be next week or the week after that because I
Yes.
think the draft is the 27th.
I
Starts the
think so.
27th.
It's the last Thursday,
Yeah,
whatever
so
that
we
is.
got that's like 3 weeks away.
Yep. So we will be coming out with a mock 3.0. So be ready for that. It's going to be, it might not change a lot. Who knows? We'll see what happens. But if you've loved today's episode of the podcast on YouTube, go ahead and give that a good old thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Let us know that you're loving it, that you've enjoyed watching these last few episodes. Again, comment below. What is your list? What is your top 5 best, greatest sports movies of all time? And if you're listening to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure you go ahead and favorite us. Make sure you share it. Share the links with your family and friends. If there's anybody that likes sports that you want to think they might like what we're doing, make sure you share it with them. It would be really, really awesome. And as always, until next time, we'll see ya.